How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Hi, Alex. How are you?
How
It's
are
so
you?
good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Hi, Madison.
Hey. It's so good to have all three of us here. I feel like this has been a long time coming, but glad we're here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
I'm sure you both speak a lot, but I'm so honored to have you both here together. So,
Thank you.
I mean, we'll talk about that too, but I do love that we've continued to stay in touch and talk regularly too.
Yeah, me too.
well, you're such a model for building just an incredible relationship. So that's just one of the many reasons we wanted to talk to you and get your advice about that. You know.
Thank
So again, welcome, and especially leading into National Infertility Awareness Week, we're so thrilled to be back on Instagram Live, back to our series, and just have you here for a really important conversation. Just as a brief introduction, thank you. Wow, everyone, so many people joining. Welcome, everyone. We have the most amazing and glowing mom of three here, Alex from our beautiful surprise. So her first son came through IVF, her second through surrogacy, and third, beautiful surprise, right? So congrats on the latest edition, and just on like getting through every day with three small boys. I don't know how I would do that. I can't imagine, but and we also have her wonderful gestational carrier, Madison, here, who helped bring her second son into the world, which is just so amazing. And we'll be talking about your journey together, different steps along the way, what you learned from it, your communication, and just like the relationship that you've built. So just really looking forward to hearing about all of that. If anyone has questions that you want to ask that you maybe didn't get to submit in advance, first of all, thank you to those who have already. Please feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them. I'm sure we'll be able to. And finally, for those who are possibly new to GoStork, we are the first fertility marketplace where intended parents find, compare, and connect with top fertility providers. And our mission is to provide inclusive, trusted access to affordable fertility care. So through these lives, we really love to also help bring more transparency and access to information and support from the experts and from those who have been through it. So thank you so much to Alex and Madison for collaborating to help us do that today. And I guess without further ado, I would just love to dive in and start at the beginning, which is really how you both came to surrogacy. You know, from Alex's perspective, we're doing IVF, moving on to surrogacy as your next family building option. You know, what did that decision-making process look like logistically? You know, what was that emotional journey like? And from Madison, we would love to hear all about why you wanted to be a gestational carrier, when you knew you wanted to do this, and even like what the screening process was like to actually become one. Basically, like, how did we get here where we got to a point where the two of you could meet and come into each other's lives, really? We can start with Alex, I think.
Okay, yeah, I remember actually Madison and I had this conversation, so it's interesting to talk about it from both of our perspectives, because we had very different like experiences getting to the point where we actually met each other, which makes sense. But like for us, we had done IVF for our first son, like you said, and then we had tried, I think, like 5 or 6 rounds of IVF to have a second. And it was more like very drawn out. I had to wait a really long time. I kept having like cycles canceled, or I had a few miscarriages. And it was to the point where I remember it was actually like about this time of year in 2019. And our doctor said, you know, we had just had another failed transfer. And he said, I'll try one more time on your body, but he was not really hopeful about me getting pregnant again. And he said, at a certain point, I really would recommend starting to look into surrogacy. And I remember when he said that, we were like, okay, well, I've heard of it, but I did not think that this was going to happen to us. And so we kind of, over the next 6 months after that, we prepped for one last cycle for my body. But then we also decided that if it didn't go well, or I wasn't allowed to do it, that we would just start to really explore surrogacy. So at that point, we started to do research on agencies. And I think that we can talk about that later, but like, just, I know with your company, that's why I like your company so much, because it took us so long to do so much research on so many companies. And it's really hard to get information, and they're not that transparent unless you actually like kind of agree to work with them. And so like, I would have loved to be able to look at like all the options without doing all the research myself. But yeah,
and more transparent.
Yeah, I love that. And then, so in the fall of 2019, we were able to do one last transfer. Unfortunately, around like 8 weeks, I had a miscarriage. And I remember sitting in the office when he told us that I wasn't really pregnant anymore. And my husband and I looked at each other and we just knew that surrogacy was going to be the option for us. And so we signed up for the agency at that point because we knew it could take like a while to match. But we actually matched with Madison in 3 weeks from our standpoint. And so that is unheard of for intended parents. Like waiting times can be like years. So we just felt like it was completely meant to be. So that's kind of where we got to where we met Madison.
Mm-hmm. I want to say I missed the memo to wear the white scoop neck shirt if I'd known it.
We're like matching. Madison.
You got that somehow without even knowing. One thing I want to say is that there's a little bit of a mixed conception, I think, about the wait times right now. We keep hearing this narrative in the media about how long wait times are, but actually we have so many agencies on GoStork, and there are some that don't have a wait time. They just might not have as big of a budget to do as much marketing as some of the other ones, like some of the ones that have been around for a long time. So one thing you can search for if you come to GoStork is wait time to match with a surrogate. And so if you're in a big rush, you can use that as a search criteria and see those that are have available gestational carriers right away. So I think people aren't totally aware that there might be agencies they don't know about that have shorter wait times.
Yeah, I think a good point, because like for us, we really did think that it was going to be like 6 months or more. And I think that like with the agency we went with, like we wouldn't obviously change anything because we had Madison and we had Dylan. Yeah. So I think though we're lucky because we just felt like at that point we weren't really in a rush, but we had been waiting like years to have our second child. So we did not want to keep waiting like months and months just to match. And so I think that for us, we were really grateful that we were able to match so quickly because we were able to just like go right into it. Because also, we'll talk about this, but it's like not once you match, that's just like the beginning. There's obviously like a lot more to get through before you even get to the transfer. So yeah.
Absolutely. Madison, how did you know you wanted to be a gestational carrier? Kind of when did you know? And just tell us about that process of becoming one.
So I had a friend, she had done it a few years prior, and I kind of watched her journey. I thought it was interesting, and, you know, at first I was like, wow, I can't believe, like, you know, I can't believe that people do that, and that's a thing. And honestly, it was kind of intriguing. It's not something that when I saw, I was like, oh, I'm going to do it. You know, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do it right now. But a few years later, I kept coming across like surrogacy stuff, like surrogacy ads and stuff. And I was like, oh, like I remember my friend did that. Like, it's really interesting. So, you know, the place I was in my life at the time, I was like, that's totally something that I would be interested in doing right now because I'm a stay-at-home mom. You know, we move frequently because my husband's in the military. But it was kind of appealing to me because it seemed like a milestone, like something I could do like for myself and for somebody else at the time, while I was kind of, you know, here with the girls and not too much going on here. And I was like, I would totally be interested in doing something like that. So I started looking online. I started researching agencies. There's a whole bunch of agencies out here in California. So it was just going through each one and like finding the right one. Because I think it's kind of scary when you don't really know anything about surrogacy. You want to make sure you have like support. You know, you want to make sure you're going with an agency, of course, that will have your back through everything and walk you through things, because it would be crazy just to be thrown into everything. You know, just, oh, here's your appointment or such and such. So yeah, just really researching the agencies and making sure I went with one that I'm comfortable with. So I actually looked at a few before this one and signed up for a couple, but it just wasn't working out for me. So that's when I went with the one where I met Alex. Yeah.
And so what was the process like, just for, women who are potentially considering being a gestational carrier? What is that screening process like?
So for me, with the matching, like with the surrogacy process, you have to first like inquire on the website. You fill out all your information, and then you have to wait for them to call you back, of course. Once they call you back, they kind of give you a list of some instructions. They're like, oh, the next process is we need your medical history, because they need to make sure you've had successful pregnancies. They need to make sure that you're healthy. So they go through the screening process. They test your partner. And then after they do all that, they have you in the system. Then they start preparing you to match. Yeah.
Yeah, they really do a lot to make sure that you're set up to succeed and have a good match with the intended parents, that you're financially stable separately from the surrogacy, compensation, right? And that you live in a supportive home so that you can, you get through the process without too much stress on the side in your life separately. So there's a lot that they really do to make sure that surrogates are supported and taken care of, and that intended parents have a good match once they do find someone, right?
Yeah,
I know.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was for our agency, I feel like what I liked about it is that, they showed us like her profile, but then we were like, yeah, we're interested in meeting her. She also has to see our profile to make sure she also wants to meet us. So it's not like she's going in blindly, like we don't have all the decision, obviously. It's her body. So we both had a choice of, we both had to mutually agree, yes, we want to meet this person. And then we had like I think 2-hour in-person meeting, because this was like before the pandemic. But we had like a 2-hour in-person meeting with the agency owner and our coordinator, to make sure like we fully understood what was going to happen and that we were all comfortable with it before we even like signed anything or went to contracts. Right. So I think they were thorough with that in the beginning.
Yeah, the matching, one of the really important topics that we get asked about, and we wanted to talk to you guys about. Both intended parents and gestational carriers should think about the criteria they're looking for in an ideal match, what type of person they want to work with, how they want to work together, how much they want to communicate, what boundaries they have. We see some gestational carriers want to help gay couples bring a child into the world. Some want to bring help parents that have other children, or single parents. Like, there's also, any preference is really viable. It's your journey. So I'd love to just understand a little bit more about what you were both looking for in a match, and just tell us about when you first met. What was that feeling like to know you sort of met the one?
Well, so I'll just start. But so for us, like before we even like matched, and I don't remember, I think Madison kind of filled out a similar thing, where there's a really long document that you fill out for the agency that explains like what's important to you, blah, blah, blah. So for us, it was like, we already had one son. And so we wanted to make sure the surrogate understood that too. And, but we were still like really wanting another child. Because some people have a hard time understanding that you want another one when you already have one. I don't know. But most surrogates understand that. But so for me, like, I really wanted to be able to have a relationship with our surrogate. Like, I really wanted to be able to talk to her directly. Like, this is before we had matched, like, because the agency said, like, there are some surrogates that don't really want contact. They just kind of want to have it be like something where you don't really talk to them. They go through the agency every time. You never really talk to them again after the baby's born. And some people, that is what they're looking for, like intended parents and surrogates, but that's not what we wanted. We wanted something where we could be in regular communication. Like, I didn't always want to have to go through the agency to talk to her. I wanted to be able to talk to her directly. In the beginning, I wanted to be able to go to every appointment. The pandemic changed that, but that was the idea. And I wanted to make sure she was comfortable with me going to every appointment. We wanted to be like involved when the birth happened. And then afterwards, we kind of said we'd play it by ear, but we both ideally wanted to be able to stay in touch afterwards, because we always went into it with like we were always have planned on telling Dylan like how he came into the world. He's too young to understand now, but like he'll know his own story. He deserves to know his own story. And we wouldn't have him without Madison. So I think for us, like we wanted to make sure like the surrogate was comfortable with us being really open with our child as well in the future. Because I don't know if everybody is comfortable with that. But so that's kind of the things that were like, there are a bunch of other things we filled out, but that I think for me was like one of the big things that was very important to us. Mm-hmm. And I think Madison can talk about it too. Like she was kind of looking for the same type of relationship, which is why we were matched.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was definitely, I wanted to keep in contact. I wanted them to be able to come to my appointments. I wanted them to preferably be local. But yeah, I wanted that relationship with them. You know, I wanted to see who I was helping, you know, and just see their story, and being able to get pictures of Dylan, like now that he's born, and it's just so special. And Alex always does that. She always sends me pictures of these little milestones, and I keep all of them because just there's a special place in my heart for Alex and Dylan and her family. But yeah, it's just, you know, I think we had like you said, we had a lot of the same wants. And when you fill out that profile, it asks you so many questions about that. And I think, you know, when they see, oh, you know, they want to keep in contact, she's comfortable with them coming to the appointments and all that, then, you know, I guess that's just how they match. So.
Yeah. And I think the local thing also made a difference, like what you just said, because like it's very different for surrogates versus intended parents. Because like for intended parents, we could be anywhere in the world technically, and we could still use a surrogate in California. But California has a lot of laws that support surrogacy. And so I think for us, like we knew that our surrogate was going to be in California. We're in California, but we're in Southern California. And they told us that, and California is very big. So they said that, you know, they could be anywhere. And we said, like, obviously we're happy with whatever happens, but we ideally didn't want to be matched with someone that was like 8 hours north of us that we would have a hard time going to. And also like we had to consider that when the baby was born, we don't want to have to leave our other son for like multiple days to go, you know, pick up our baby. So we had kind of all those thoughts. So the fact that Madison was like 45 minutes away from us was just so perfect, because even though like the pandemic have gotten in the way of us seeing each other as much as we wanted to, we still knew we were like really close by. And I could even like, when she would have appointments, I would go wait outside the appointment a lot of times just so that we could see each other for a couple minutes, because I couldn't go in. But I think
I've seen some pictures from the sidewalk, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I realized, like we didn't really take pictures together, but it was because we just really spent so few, like we really mainly talked, because we would have spent a lot more time together than we did, but like pandemic wise, like I wasn't allowed at the appointments and all of that. And so, and really the appointments, like the doctor was so fast anyway, that I think you were in and out most of the time in like 10 or 15 minutes. He's actually the same doctor I went to for my pregnancy. So, but yeah, I think overall, like they did a good, I think they just knew what was important to both of us to match, and they focused on those things, which I think we both really appreciated.
And so as far as your first meeting and discussion, how did that feel? Did you know right away that you really had your match, and kind of what did you talk about?
Yeah, it was, so my husband and I were both there, and then Madison and her husband were both there. And so that was really nice, because I feel like we were able to, because obviously like for me and Brian, we're both the parents, so we both want to be involved. But even with, like, I feel like with Wesley, like he was just as, like, even though Madison was obviously more involved, it was important that he was like part of it, and that he, like, it's the whole family's involved in it. Like she wasn't going to be in a vacuum while this happened. Like her kids were involved, her husband was involved. And so I think it was nice to be able to meet both of them together too. But mainly just like we kind of talked about like what we've talked about here, how we got to the point of surrogacy from each of our standpoints. We were able to share a little bit more about like our experience with loss and like why we had turned to surrogacy. And I just feel like it just for me at least, I mean, I felt like such a connection with Madison like the first time we met, and I just felt like she was so empathetic, and like I just couldn't believe that someone who had had their kids so easily could understand my situation so well, because
Mhm.
I don't think I think a lot of people have a hard time with that if they haven't gone through it. So to meet someone that not only is empathetic when she hasn't experienced it herself, but also wants to like actually help us have a child is just, we just felt like very connected to her immediately.
Yeah, I think also, with my background, my aunt struggled with infertility for a really long time. She was able to have one baby, and it's something that I got to see her struggle with firsthand, and it my heart always went out to her with that. And honestly, when Alex was telling her story, it really just it made me feel some more connection to you. And also just, I really wanted to help you guys, and you guys were such good people. The meeting, like, y'all were just so cute, and I don't know, just your story was just very, it touched my heart. And I think that, when I met you, I knew as soon as we left, I was like, let's do it with them. And I was like about to like just texted right after Christy right after. And I was like, yeah, I want them. But then, they're like, well, think about it for a day. Think about it for then like you have to wait.
Don't do it tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I too. I'm like, bear with me if I'm a little tired. I'm about 50 hours in back to work from my maternity leave. But I wouldn't want to have the first conversation with anyone else. So you two are, I just love the relationship and just hearing about it. So you matched, and obviously you became pregnant, which is amazing, but there's a few more steps between there, which we can't get into everything in detail. We have a limited amount of time, but you had to sign contracts, do your transfer. Alex, I believe you might have had embryos created from before, but did some of those, share the story of like the early stages of getting to the place where you were pregnant, and kind of, how you got to know each other through that process and what those steps were like for you.
I think a lot of it in the beginning is like, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. Like, you are gathering everything you can. We actually got lucky on timing too, because Madison was exactly at a good point in her cycle to go to the doctor like the week after we decided to sign, right?
Yeah.
So that worked out well. And so, because like the doc, she could only go in certain times during her cycle. So we were able to kind of jumpstart it. And then, there's like psychological and medical and all that. So everything kind of went as smoothly as it could have. I don't know if Madison even remembers the date, but we got news that we had officially both signed the contract on December 18th, which is my birthday. And then that actually ended up being Dylan's birthday too. And so it just, I don't know. I love dates, but like the fact that it all
have the same birthday, that's like another one of my favorite facts.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe he was born on my birthday, but I love it. But yeah, I think for us, like, so it took a couple months, probably from October to December, January to get started. Our doctor said that, like, so Madison had never been a surrogate before. So he said that she had to do like the ERA cycle, whereas the mock transfer, which actually ended up working out because she needed like, I think, an extra day of progesterone, right? Something. Yeah. And so it was good that we did it. We did one transfer. The first transfer actually didn't work. But then we all kind of came together and decided that we wanted to try one more time. And I think we got kind of lucky because we started like right when the pandemic started, and we still were able to do it. So, but yeah, so we ended up having the transfer just about 2 years ago, because it was April of 2020. But yeah, there's just like, everybody I think underestimates, it's like, I think it was 6 months from the time that we met first to the time that we transferred the embryo for Dylan, that kind of timeline.
Yeah.
Was
we did. What was that?
And was that what you did? Where did everything go kind of as you expected? Were you well educated on that, or kind of what did you learn about it along the way?
So I thought it would be a little bit quicker, but with the medical clearance, they're having to test all your levels, make sure everything's perfect. and then the mock cycle, which I had no clue like that we were gonna have to do that. So yeah, it took a little bit longer with the mock cycle and the failed transfer. But I think by the time we started, we were so ready. And Alex, she was great at making sure that they saw us during the pandemic, because they tried to cancel our cycle. Because
Mhm.
they're
I
the doctors. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that conversation so well.
I was like, if we were gonna have to wait like until we were cleared to go back, that would have been horrible. But
Well, I
yeah.
think
It's so important to be set up to be supported, that your health, that we're looking out for everyone's health, that this is everything is legally in place, and just that your relationship is set up to succeed. So those couple extra months that you might not know are part of the process are so important in the long run.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that when it comes like a valuable lesson we learned, like when they tried to cancel the cycle because of the pandemic, I mean, that was a very unique situation, but I do think that I just found like you need to find a doctor too that treats like the pregnancy like it's not different just because it's surrogacy. Like obviously it's different, and Madison was the patient, but it was still our baby. And they had told me when the pandemic started that they were canceling all surrogacy pregnancies, but that if I was the one getting pregnant, they would have let me continue. And I said, that is not okay. Like you can't tell me that, basically discriminate against us, saying like, if you could get pregnant, you could do it. So I think when I just kind of fought back, they're like, okay, yeah, you're not a new patient. Madison's been here before. So luckily, like we didn't have to push too hard and they let us do it. But I just think that like finding a doctor also that is very like surrogacy friendly and is familiar with it. And not only like the fertility doctor, but the OB doctor in the hospital, like finding places ideally that are surrogacy friendly, I think helps make the process go a little more smoothly too.
Right. It's so important to advocate for yourself. And who knew you would have to advocate in that way? But it's good that you didn't have to keep trying to advocate so hard to get there. Like some people are afraid to do that. And just knowing that you brought it up maybe once that this isn't fair, and then you got to move forwards, just shows to everyone else to advocate for what, you're expecting and what you deserve. And I think that, that point about doctor's appointments actually does lead perfectly into a topic that was requested, which is, what were the doctor's appointments like through the lens of, like, I think it's interesting that you've been through pregnancies, both of you. You've both been to all the same doctor's appointments, all the same milestones, ultrasounds, and checkpoints, but it's from such a different perspective. Alex now as the, instead of the pregnant mom to be and the patient, you're a little bit on the sidelines. And I don't mean sidelines in a negative way, but it is a term that you've used in our conversations in the past. I want what that felt like and how you help others prepare, which is like advice that you've given to many others. And Madison, going from your own pregnancy for your child to a surrogacy, just how you prepared differently. What questions did you bring that were different on your list? Like, just what did that different experience feel like for you, both of you?
Yeah, I think like from the intended, like ours was obviously kind of a unique situation, which hopefully will never happen again. But in terms of not being able to go to the appointments, but I think that even though we couldn't go, like Madison was so like thoughtful about all the appointments, because she would we just ended up having her mainly record it because it was just easier for everybody. Like that's one thing where I'm glad that we were communicating many things, but we were communicating directly, because the agency kept saying like, you have to call and you have to FaceTime. And that is not what worked for us. And so like it actually, I remember talking to Madison, it like stressed her out more to be on FaceTime during it. And we were like, okay, don't do FaceTime, just record it. So she was very thoughtful about making sure we were included in the appointments, even though we couldn't go. But I know I've talked to you about this before, Rebecca, but like when we first started and we were able to go to appointments, I was kind of in like, I don't know if culture shock's not the right word, but I had obviously never experienced something like that before. So when we had our first appointment with Madison, with the doctor that I could go to before the pandemic, I remember he was like obviously addressing Madison because she's the patient. But then
And that's like, our doctor from before too, that you
had. He was my doctor for like years, and he like completely did not acknowledge that I was in the room. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, this is still like, I obviously wanted them to focus on Madison. I wanted to make sure everything went well. But I was also like, I'm still here. Like, I'm the mom. This is so weird that you're. So I think just like going into it with the expectation that like it can be independent parents, but like it's no longer about like you for a while. Like it's about the baby and about making sure everything goes like as smoothly as possible. And like that doesn't mean you're not the mom. That doesn't mean you don't need support, but you are going to kind of take a step back for a while just because you're not the one going to appointments anymore. And I think I've said this too before to you, Rebecca, but like it was almost as my husband and I got to experience this pregnancy in the same way as each other, which was very unique because I'd never really thought about how much he was always on the sideline because he's not the one that was pregnant. And so that was kind of unique and special for us actually, because then I kind of understood his standpoint of how he feels about everything as well.
There's a lining end, but this one where you could bond over like understanding what he felt like the whole time, I think is.
Yeah, and I know Madison, like it must have been different for you to go to appointments in that way.
It was definitely different, but I think, at the same time, I was still excited about all the little milestones. I definitely treated it like I would have treated my own pregnancy. But yeah, as long as everything was going good with baby, I was super happy. And just the only different thing is just making sure I recorded all my appointments for you. But, it was different because, I was caring for Alex, but at the same time, I still treated it like, it was my pregnancy because I'm taking care of him. And so it was different, but in the same way, a little bit the same, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
The doctor still treated me the same. So it wasn't like I was treated different because I was a surrogate or anything. So.
Yeah. And, I wanted to step back into something that keeps coming up in all of these questions. And that's definitely something that we get asked about. And, intended parents are nervous going into this relationship about what the communication will be like, how much access they'll have. COVID obviously adds a whole other layer to this. And there's the additional layer that often they live far apart. Ideally you would work with a surrogate in a surrogacy friendly state where the laws are really in favor and supportive of surrogacy. So if you don't live in a state like that, it's better to work with a carrier that does. And so I just want to hear more in detail about how you set up your communication process. I think it's really interesting that you didn't want to FaceTime or be in the appointments, which actually a lot do, but what did that look like? Did you have real clear expectations up front, or did you kind of build on your process as you got to know each other throughout? And what did you communicate on one-on-one versus through your agency? Just again, because you're such a model of a great relationship. So we want to know what, others can learn from that.
So I don't think I didn't, it's not that I didn't, I would have loved to go to the appointments. And I think the FaceTime for me, if that's what made Madison comfortable, we would have been happy to be there live. We also kind of the idea of recording it because then we had it forever. We always have appointments. Versus just watching it one time, which I know is how most people experience appointments, but it just felt different. But I think we would probably agree on it, but we kind of learned as we went through the communication part. I don't think we really knew what to expect when it started. I do think that I would highly encourage future intended parents and surrogates to kind of talk more about the communication in more depth in advance. Obviously for us, it worked out and we were able to communicate well and we worked it out. But I think sometimes if the agency, for example, I think they kind of said it as we'll be the go-between. And I don't think they really expected us to talk so much.
Right. Did you talk every day? Did you talk about, diet? Or I think you sent cute gifts along the way. I mean, just how much did you kind of talk about it, and what did you set any boundaries,
Yeah. So, for me, at least, I really was I really believed that there needed to be certain boundaries of topics that I didn't think were appropriate for me to talk to Madison about. I didn't think it was appropriate for me to tell her what to eat, or, I didn't think it was appropriate for me to talk about certain aspects that like there was a nutritionist through the agency. I thought that was their job, and the agency would talk to her about that. Finances also not appropriate for us to kind of talk about between each other. That was something that the agency would talk about. And so I do think that it is nice to have like a go-between person when there's certain topics that I felt like were inappropriate for me to talk to Madison about. But then also it was really nice, like when there were many miscommunications between us and the coordinator, when she would not really understand like what I was trying to say to her or Madison, we would just say, okay, we'll just talk to each other alone. And then we would figure out where the miscommunication was and what was actually happening. And so I feel like with that, like that helped a lot. And that's how we kind of learned along the way of what topics were better for us to just handle alone and what topics were better to handle with the agency too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great, because we, in the very beginning when we met, I remember when they were like, what do you guys expect out of your relationship? I remember Alex, you saying, you're like, just, see how it goes. Obviously we want to have good communication, but you were never pushy anything.
I'm glad.
It was very casual, and you trusted me. So I feel like with that, it made me, it gave me respect. So I was able to do what I was supposed to do, and you trusted me to do what I was supposed to do, and yeah, we communicated, and it was nice because I feel like that just developed on its own between us.
I agree. And I feel like that's something that trust and respect, I think, was something that was really important for me to make you feel, and like, truly, I respect you and truly I trust you. But I feel like I always wanted to make sure you felt that from us too, because I mean, you were carrying our child, right? So like, even things like when we were talking about the birth and they were saying, epidural, no epidural, we're like, that is not my decision because you're the one giving birth. Like, I'm not going to tell you what's most comfortable for you. So I think that we tried to really default to like, this is your body. And like, yes, of course it's our baby, but like, you have a right to decide about certain things like that. Because like, I remember we were talking about this even like with the food thing, because they ask us like, check in on like food or whatever. And I had been pregnant before. So I obviously understood like how you feel during certain times during the pregnancy. But I remember even in our first meeting, I was like, I know that in the first trimester, you might want to just live on like bread. Like, it's just certain things that I feel like we just tried to really be respectful.
Yeah. So
what?
Or that's all you can live on and keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah, the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's such a good reminder. I think life can be so stressful if you're an intended parent, you have someone carrying your baby, you have your family, your job, everything else going on in the world. You can assume someone knows that you respect and trust them, but when you really intentionally make sure that they know, when you take that time, I think it makes a big difference. And don't just assume. I think really intentionally sure that she knew that, and that really helped with the relationship.
Yeah, I think I'm glad.
Yeah.
And we also in turn felt like respected also. Like I felt like there were a lot of certain conversations where like even the things of making sure we got all the videos from the appointments and like making sure she was checking in about certain things, and like she'd ask like how we felt about different aspects of like along the way. And I feel like, I think because there was like a mutual respect and trust, it made it a lot easier, because I think if like one person is respecting the other but you're not getting it back, then the other person doesn't really want to keep trying, if that makes sense. So I feel like that mutual like thing really is part of the reason why it worked better for us too.
And I think it seems like you both really mutually supported each other to the extent that your relationship kind of tables are allowed. But where else did you get support from? It's so important to, have support along this can be a difficult journey. But close family and friends that you can talk to and trust, therapy. I think there was therapy. Was there anything through the agency? Did you see like a fertility specialist therapist, Alex, that's often recommended? So where did you get your support from along the way? And if it was something that maybe you wish you had done differently, what would you recommend to others?
Yeah, for me, I wish that I had done the support part for just us differently. I don't know, like, I think we were just so focused on like having a healthy child finally again, like we just didn't really think about the fact that there would be certain emotions that came up for like me as well throughout the process. Cause I mean, we were like so grateful, but obviously like I didn't get to carry him, and there's a whole thing with that. Like, but I think for me, like we kind of thought there, like the agency has a lot of like, or ideally support like for the surrogate, which totally makes sense. But I think for me, I wish we had found like an outside like therapist or just someone that we could have talked to, especially me. Like I'm much more of a talker, obviously. But like, I think that if I had been able to find like an outside source for support that was like not a family member or a friend, I think that, I mean, obviously everything went smoothly. I just think for me, like after he was born, I had a lot of stuff that was like kind of built up that I didn't even realize was there. And I ended up talking to a therapist after he was born, and that helped me a lot. But I really think that like I would suggest to any intended parent, like make sure that you're taken care of too in terms of support, like specifically for you, because I really didn't even consider the fact that I needed support also. And I think even my family members, like they were very well meaning, but they didn't really really understand like how to support like us, you know? And so I think that's the aspect where sometimes having someone that's like a third party not related to you to help support you is a little easier, and also you feel more comfortable like sharing more things with them because it's not going anywhere. So yeah, I would have probably sought out like more of a therapist during the process. I honestly didn't even consider it though at the time.
There's so much more awareness, but it's still such a unique journey. And someone who is a mom or has gone through pregnancy, it's still so different to go through it as an intended parent. And
Yeah,
you can't really exactly empathize or sympathize, I should say, you know, if you have gone through it, it's so unique. I think therapists that specialize in infertility journey, they know the exact steps, the appointments,
right.
specific stressor coping mechanisms. So I think that's in advance and that support that's very highly specified and qualified, right?
Yeah, and I think even, I mean, I don't know how Madison felt, but I feel like even finding someone that's more specifically just for her individually would have probably been nice for you, right, Madison?
Madison, yeah.
Yeah, because we had the agency provides a support group, a monthly one, but I feel like it's so surface level. We never got really into details about, you know, anything really about like feelings. Like we would talk about our, you know, where we were in our journey or the next milestone or this or that. But, you know, sometimes we didn't really get into, I feel like, just certain topics that would have been nice to talk about. So time around, I feel like I've kind of reached out to other surrogates, and a few have reached out to me. And I keep in contact with them and talk to them because it's nice to actually talk to somebody who's doing it as well. You know, maybe not to say like a therapist, which I mean, it would be nice too, but at the same time, just talking to a couple of surrogates that are going through the same stuff, like it's nice to have their support. But also, you know, I do have the support of my husband and the family, which is really nice. So I always felt supported.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Do you mind sharing? There were some topics you wish could have been talked about. Do you mind sharing what those were specifically?
Well, I think it's just, you know, like maybe if somebody would have been like, how are you feeling? You know, because like every time you would say, oh, like I'm having some morning sickness, or like, you know, like today is like kind of just like struggles, you know, just because we're surrogates, we're still human. We still have morning sickness, or we still have hard days. So you know, to have people to vent to sometimes about stuff like that, that's going to be like, oh, well, you signed up for that. You know what I mean? Just somebody that is there that you can talk to, and they're like, oh, you know, they understand.
When you asked about a lot more for your own pregnancy, like how you were feeling, if you were feeling sick, were you asked more for your first pregnancy?
Yeah, I would say like when you're a surrogate, it's more like people are like, well, you did it to yourself. So, you know, it's like, not you did it to yourself, but it's like that's something you signed up for. So it's like you don't have you can't, talk about what's really happening. But it's like with your own pregnancy, it's different because everybody is like, it's your baby. So yeah, I would say it's different for sure.
Which
Yeah,
is
I think
valid.
that's
Like the grandparents are excited to hear about or know how you're feeling when they're carrying their grandchild, for example, right? A little bit more, but at the same time, you're still going through a pregnancy, and it's still really your body, and you're such a like this generous, altruistic way. And it would be nice if people would understand to ask just something for you. I think that's
and I think that's an interesting, when you were saying like connecting with other surrogates too, like that you are, Madison, I feel like I also like connected with a lot more intended parents after our journey, and that I like now have like become very good friends with some intended parents because we had this shared experience that a lot of people can't really understand. And I think for me, the therapy was more important because of the like loss that we'd gone through prior to it. It wasn't really about, I don't think I would have needed therapy like for the surrogacy process. I think it was more just me processing things that had happened prior to getting there that were more important to me. And that's kind of what I ended up talking to a therapist about. But I do like that shared bond of talking to other women like that have specifically experienced like what you are experiencing really makes a huge difference also. Because like you said, they can just understand in a way that no one else can understand.
But I think about needing to talk about it after is just important as well, because I think people have this misconception that once you have the child, you should just be so happy and grateful, which of course you are, but that doesn't just eliminate everything that you went through in the past. And you still, I mean, I some similar experience, but just like my son was in the NICU had a huge scare, and it's just because, of course, I couldn't be happier that he's happy and healthy child today, but that doesn't eliminate the fears and the memories and everything that you went through. And it's still something to be sometimes processed. Once you come down from it and you're like, oh, okay, I'm here. Sometimes everything floods back, I would imagine.
Well, that's something that I definitely underestimated. I think that when we had waited so long for him, I expected that when he was born that everything would just be happy. And I know that was naive, but like I just really thought that I would just like be over everything. And I actually ended up having like a ton of anxiety, which is why I ended up seeing a therapist like in the first couple of months of when he was born, because I was so terrified that something would happen to like him or my older son. And I was having like so many nightmares about it that I mean, he was so healthy and so happy and everything was good. But like just in my head, I was like so worried about him. And I know it wasn't like directly that, it was because of everything that I like hadn't processed that we'd gone through. But that's where I think it's like, you can't really ignore those feelings because they're eventually going to catch up with you, even when you're not expecting them to. And so I think like, because I was able to process that, that helped a lot. Then like, I mean, I ended up having another baby, which was crazy, but yeah. I think just, that even helped then when I did get pregnant again. I had a lot of anxiety, but I think because I kind of knew what to expect a little bit more and how to work through it, it was a little bit easier to process because I had actually talked about it. So I think that, yeah, just having that. And also even like for surrogates, I think people expect like, they have the baby and then they're just like, okay, you can just go, like she had to recover from giving birth, and then also there's just like that whole aspect. So, and I think just the fact that me and Madison had already talked about the fact that we wanted to stay in communication with each other afterwards was important to us as well. And just having those expectations of what will happen after the birth for the relationship between everybody is important because it's not the same for everyone. And some people don't want that relationship. So
I think people should just, and they're not alone. Like it is so go through things postpartum, and often the general public or people that don't understand the infertility journey think that, again, like we said, once you have a baby, you should be so happy and grateful. And there's, I think one of the therapists that we interviewed on a live said that there's higher rates of, postpartum depression and anxiety and such if you've gone through an infertility journey leading up to it. So, that you're not alone and there's resources to help through that. And don't feel like there's anything about you. This is something that a lot of people go through, and there's communities talk to, like you said, other attendants. Oh, who's there?
I'm sitting on the floor next to Tyler because he was sleeping before, but now he woke up. Dylan's taking a nap in his crib.
And actually, to jump ahead to the birth, which is one of the most fun topics to talk about. So tell us about the delivery. Was it on time? Was it what you expected? Who was in the room? Just what was that part of your story like for both of you?
So like for me, like the doctor had told me, because my due date was actually right on Christmas. So I was like, by the time it was like a couple of weeks, I was like 36, 37 weeks. And the doctor said that baby was full term and all that stuff. And he gave me the option to be induced. So I asked Alex if that was something that they would be comfortable with. That way we could just plan everything. They could be there. And it wouldn't be like, oh, I'm giving birth in the middle of the night. Like, pack your bags. Like, they were able to get childcare for the kid, and I was able to make sure the girls had someone here. It was us because we were able to plan it. And the doctor only gave me, he was like, well, you can have the baby on the 18th, or you can have the baby after Christmas. And I was like, but on the 18th, like, just because I was like, yes, let's do it before Christmas. But then Alex was like, oh, it's my birthday. And I was like, oh, I was like, is that okay? And she's like, yeah. But yeah, I think the birth went good because we got there, and Alex was so understanding about everything. She made me feel like I could make my decisions. She wasn't pushy about asking people to check up. Like, even when we had, somebody that wasn't checking up, she still gave me the say so and like when to ask them for things. And she was just really respectful. And she also, before we went to the hospital, she asked me what I was comfortable with as far as her and Brian being in the room, like if she wanted them to stand behind me or, all that stuff. So she was very respectful and mindful, and I appreciated that because it made me feel comfortable. And I didn't feel like somebody was, just overstepping or in my face about anything. So I think it made it go really smooth. For me, it was a beautiful moment. I think how long was I in labor? Was it like 6 hours?
Yeah, 6 hours, something.
Yeah. So by the time I was induced, it was about 6 hours. And then, everything moved along pretty quickly. And then it was time to push, and baby came out. And Brian cut the cord, and I got to hold him. I forgot that. Yeah. I got to hold him for. To do it. Yeah. But yeah, then he went to them, and they stayed in the room with us for a little bit so that we could just all be together, which I also appreciated because, they could have just gone right out, but they chose to stay in the room with me for a little bit. And, I got to see them together, and it just helped set everything in stone. So it was good.
Yeah, I think like I had a very, like, I just thought it was like the perfect day. It was just so special. And I really was kind of nervous going into it too, because I wasn't sure like if one, obviously the focus, I wanted to make sure you were comfortable, because I know that you like, obviously like giving birth is a big deal. So I knew that you were like nervous about the actual birth, just because you didn't know like because you can't control it. You don't know how it's going to go. That's why I think being induced was like just the best idea overall, because like you had been induced before, you knew your body responded to it. And also like, then as you said, it was really nice for us to be able to plan. Like we said goodbye to our older son, left that morning, got to the hospital, and it wasn't like rushed or stressful. And yeah, I feel like also, so they let, it was a very surrogacy friendly hospital too. So they let, so it was Madison, and then her husband was in the room with us, obviously. And then I was in the room the entire day. And then my husband, they actually let him sit in the waiting room, which no one had sat in like a year. But they let him sit in the waiting room. And then we were able to call him in like pretty much right before she was about to like push. And I think for that, they didn't allow that many people in the room. They didn't want all 4 of us to be in the room the whole time. But that's a conversation, like Madison was saying, we had in advance, where I said, like, both of us can wait in the waiting room if you're more comfortable, like during the actual labor. And I think, like what you were saying too, Madison, like, I personally am very grateful that you let me be in the room the whole day, because I just feel like we got to even bond more than we had, because it was like the most time we were able to spend together the whole time. And like, I was able to talk more with your husband, who I'd never really talked to that much. And he was like, just so funny. But I remember, just like, I feel like I really appreciated being able to be a part of the whole day, because I saw you like progress the whole day. I heard what the nurses were having to say. I kept hearing the heartbeat. Like, I saw you get the epidural. I just felt like I was much more a part of it because I was able to be in the room with you. And then, I mean, it was crazy because labor, it starts off kind of slow with the induction, but then it was like all of a sudden she was like there and ready to go, and the doctor was literally like fast walking through the parking lot. We could see him coming and like to come. And
they got the call.
Yeah. Well, and I just remember too, there were just like it just felt very special that we all shared all those moments together. And like, my husband came in like just shortly before she started to push, and then we like kind of stepped back like behind her, just because we wanted to be respectful of, because it's a very, very intimate time, so we wanted to like be respectful of all of that. And so I remember when Dylan came out too, it was like he was followed by this gigantic gush of water, because he had like blocked in some of the fluid, and the doctor got like completely soaked, and he was like, well, I've never seen that happen before. And it was just like, he made a grand entrance into the world for sure. But then also like the nurses talked to us about like, like about if I was going to try breastfeeding, or like we talked about like some parents want like the surrogate to try to feed a little bit for the colostrum, and like we didn't really feel comfortable with that, so she like just saved some of it for us. And then it's like all those conversations we had in advance. And then they were saying like, okay, but they were saying, when it comes to the birth, like they did ask us if we wanted to immediately be moved into another room to have like the golden hour thing with just the 3 of us, or if we wanted to be in the room with Madison and her husband. And we felt like we had gone through this entire journey with them. She was giving birth to him, and we wanted to include them in that first hour, because like you said, Madison, it just kind of gave closure to the experience too, because then we could have that hour with him. We could just kind of talk and be like calm right after, and then they like weighed him and did that stuff in that room, and then that's when we kind of left. And I think it just made the whole thing feel like more calm, just because none of it felt like rushed. So yeah, I mean, I honestly felt like it was just like perfect. So
the whole day was so good. And it was funny because I was like, it's just when you and Brian gave me like hugs when you guys were leaving, like I'll just never forget it. It was just the tightest hugs I've ever gotten.
You're gonna make
but
well, because you just your baby.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like we're like, okay, this is just the most. Sorry, this is Tyler, but we're like, this is just like, he's just antsy. We're like, this is just like the most unique experience that like, and we just, I mean, we obviously could never thank you enough for everything. And so just like having Dylan, like he was real and like in our arms, and we had waited so long for that moment that like we obviously, I don't think I've ever hugged anyone tighter. We're just so happy.
Your baby. There are a couple of points in there I think I just wanted to touch on really quickly, that this just shows again why it's so important that one of the requirements to even be a surrogate is that you are a mom and you've carried a pregnancy successfully. Just the little fact that you said, well, actually a big one, that you knew how your body responded to induction, and this isn't your first delivery. It's scary as it is, but just the fact that it wasn't your first one is a huge difference. And it's just so important that you know what to expect, you know how your body responds. Not everyone knows that gestational carriers have carried pregnancies before, and that's just one of the most basic requirements. And then Alex, can you just a little bit more about why it was so helpful to be in a surrogacy friendly hospital, that had a lot of experience with this? I think even just what they called you, I think sometimes hospitals get that wrong. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think intended parents would want to research if there's surrogacy friendly hospital near where their gestational carrier lives, and like, why is that?
So the reason why, like, for us that it was so important is that, like, one, they called me mom. Like, when the nurses came in, I know that sounds silly, but it's like when they came in, they addressed me as the mom. Like, obviously they were making sure they were addressing Madison and making sure she was taken care of. She was just about to give birth. But like when they had questions about after the birth and like the baby and like what certain things, it made it very helpful that they were addressing me about those questions. Also, like, they asked like me how we were going to feed the baby, and like Madison and I already kind of talked about all of the options for that, so that was something we could do. And also like the fact that we were able to have that time when Madison first gave birth, and like we were able to have that first hour together. But then after that, it was, I think, important to both of us that we were able to move into a separate room, because we got to move forward with our baby, and then Madison got time to recover, and she actually was able to leave that night. But because they gave her the think of staying, but you wanted to go home.
I was like,
but
go home and see my kid.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. Like, we just felt like we could both move on. Like, she could go be back with her family and focus on them again completely. And like, we could go be with our family. And I think even just the hospital respecting that we would want to be together, but then also want our own space after that was, I think, very helpful. And then they also just like the fact that they let me in the room with her husband and made sure my husband could be in the room. Because at that point there was a one visitor rule, but they made an exception because they knew it was a different experience. And like, I remember we weren't sure if the hospital was going to make the exception, but Madison's doctor was like, oh, they're definitely going to make this exception. This is a unique situation, so he was like totally supportive of like, I want to make sure Madison has her support person and you guys are still able to be in the room with her. So I think all of those things, like, and even in California, we were able to like establish parentage before Dylan was born. We didn't adopt him afterwards, which is the case for a lot of people in a lot of countries, and even states. But for us, we were able to, with our lawyers' help, establish that we were the parents, so that when the hospital had all the information they needed to have, so that when Dylan was born, we were the ones that were on the birth certificate from the very beginning. And that sounds kind of simple, but it's actually not for surrogacy. It's very complicated. So the fact that they were able to get all those documents ahead of time made it way easier for us after, because then even things like when we went to go request his birth certificate afterwards, like the clerks and stuff have no idea that I didn't give birth to him, like just things like that just makes it easier like afterwards. So
yeah, I guess it's important to be in a surrogacy friendly state, but just also the hospital having a lot of experience with this, I'm sure, helped ease that.
Exactly.
I know we're actually out of time, but do you guys have a couple more questions? Especially want to catch up on what's been going on since then. Obviously a lot. It's been a little over a year, right? Or a year and 4 months. You Alex and Madison, I think you're carrying for parents, but just catch us up on your latest, both of your latest journeys, pregnancies, etc.
Yeah, I mean, very briefly, when Dylan was about 4 months old, I found out I was pregnant naturally, which is totally will blow my mind forever. Like that, I don't know, science is crazy, but I could not believe I got pregnant that way. And so we have little Tyler here. And yeah, so it's just kind of a whirlwind from going from having like one child to having three within like a year. But yeah, it's wonderful. And then Madison and I stay in touch a lot. Like she said, I send her a lot of little videos of Dylan. Like, he just started walking and I was sending her little videos and stuff. And so it's just really nice to be able to just like catch up and do that. And then, yeah, Madison's on a new journey.
Yeah. So after Dylan, I immediately, like the night we got home from the hospital, I was like, what do you think about me doing it again? I asked my husband, And he was like, I just knew you were going to say that. Like the day went so good. Like I was like, I got to do it again. But yeah, so it took a while because you have to wait. You have to wait 6 months and then you have to be matched. And so yeah, went through the whole process. It took a little bit longer this time. But yeah, I got matched and now I'm 10 weeks pregnant. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also think because I get to hear about, like, Madison will tell me about her journey now, and it's like special to be able to hear about this journey with a new family. Like, even though we're not involved obviously at all, it's like nice that Madison and I have stayed enough in touch with each other where I can like hear how it's going for her and how things are progressing, and it's just like really special to hear about this new journey with her too.
Yeah, and we did have a question about that, though you've answered it throughout. I mean, you know, how much you're in each other's lives now and what that relationship looks like. Obviously, you're not just seeing each other on Instagram lives, you're actually consistently in each other's lives and planned it that way. So it's totally valid if that's not what pairs would like, but just the fact that that's what you wanted and that's how it worked out is just thing to emulate. So,
well, like we haven't like actually met up a ton of times, and Madison's moving across the country soon. Okay. But we will always continue to like talk by text and like stay in touch. And I think that's something that we plan on always like keeping communication and in touch with each other for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was, I guess, just the biggest learning, if we can just look back, that you didn't expect, or, you know, when, especially, you know, Alex, when intended parents come to you for advice, I think you, just going through your process of finding your agency, maybe you would have asked different questions to find, you know, through your consideration process, or I guess, I don't want to answer for you, but what was one of those things that you really learned that you help educate others on?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the top questions I get are like, how did I find my agency? That's probably the top question I get. Like, how did you start the process? How did you know you wanted to work with an agency versus not an agency? Like for us, we didn't know anybody in our lives that could carry a child for us, like a family member or anything. Plus, we didn't really feel comfortable asking someone that unless they had offered. And so we knew the agency was going to be the only path for us. And like, honestly, now I really push people towards your site because I always send them that link because I feel like I can't explain, like, I don't know what every agency has. I don't know how much every agency costs, like what the different options are in different places. So I feel like the fact that it's all there on your site, like I always just push people because I think that if I had been able to do like spend not 6 months researching, that would have been great. But I mean, it worked out, like it obviously worked out for us. But I think that that's like probably my number one question that I get is like how to go about finding an agency.
That's the same with me. Everybody says, how do you do it? And I always tell them I researched the agencies, but the fact that you have all that information and it's there is actually really cool because, you know, you have to go on sites and dig for, you know, like terms and all that stuff. And sometimes it's exhausting. Like Alex said, it can take a long time. So, yeah.
And even just the financial aspect of it for both sides, I feel hard to get information about that without like talking directly to agencies sometimes. So I know like you have all that information transparently on your site, and I feel like that's so helpful for people because that's really hard to find sometimes. And even just like considering all the different options that the agency won't necessarily ask you about. Like, I don't think they talked to us a lot about communication. They talked about other things. They knew we wanted to talk to each other, but they didn't really get that in depth about it. So you just made the weirdest noise.
That you would have asked that vetting process, asked agencies like, how much do you communicate with us? Maybe how many different parents are on does each case coordinator have?
Yes, that certain questions like that are really important. And I think coming in prepared with questions to the first meeting with the agency is very important because the first meeting is very long in a good way, but like it's overwhelming. They give you so much information that you don't think you have questions. And then you realize later that you do still have questions. So I think coming in prepared, or just like saying to the agency, you know, I'm kind of overwhelmed right now, but I will have more questions for you later. And just like feeling comfortable asking them like specific questions like that is a good idea. Because like even before we had the meeting with Madison, we had our own initial meeting with the agency that was like 2 hours long and so much information. But I still had questions, but I felt like, okay, we've already been here for so long, I don't want to keep this going. So I think that's kind of like having those questions and then having the option to talk about them more after you process everything is important too. Yeah, I think I have to go feed this little guy.
It can be dating, but if you come with your list, you're less likely to kind of forget or get stressed about it and not ask.
Yeah.
Well, we have to let you go. Thank you so much again for your time and just being so open and honest about everything that you went through. And, you know, especially, I can't say that enough leading into, again, Infertility Awareness Week. You both do so much to support this community. Madison literally helping families bring babies into the world. Alex lending your voice and just being like inspiring and supportive to so many intended parents now. What is it, over 100,000 now? When we first met, it was just helping people with the ups and downs of their journey. I think, you know, thank you for everything that you both do. If anyone didn't get to ask today, or you're watching this after, which we know a lot of people watch these at different times, if you have questions for us, feel free to DM us. And, you know, if you guys have other topics you'd like to see in these lives or other people you'd like us to invite, we love the feedback. So reach out anytime. And thank you again for joining. You both have little ones, and Madison, you're pregnant. So thank you for your time so much.
Yeah. Madison, thank you, Rebecca, so much.
Yeah, thank you for having.
Yeah.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
day. Take care of that little.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye, Alex.
Bye.